Hello, my name is Katrina Neiman, and I am recording this video blog for an assignment for AgComm 400. The assignment we were given was called The Hot Cup of Culture. And the point of this assignment was for us to, either through books or events, get in touch with a culture that is different than our own. We were given several options, and I chose to do art events, and you had to do 3 of these. And the reason I chose to do art events is I wanted to be involved. I like being active with different things, and I figured by choosing that option instead of just reading one book, I would get probably a more complete idea of the culture. And so the events I chose were Kodo, which was hosted by McCain Performing Arts, the Japanese Food Sales, which was hosted by KSU Japanese Student Association, and the KU Japan Festival, which was hosted by the KU Japanese Student Association. These 3 events with Kodo, that was the one I enjoyed the most. Kodo was a performance by taiko drummers. And taiko is actually a drum, and it's used in festivals all throughout Japan ever since it was invented. And the point of a taiko performance is to be very precise. Precision is exactly the main thing they want. It's usually extremely energetic, and they're trying to tell a story while they play the drums. You're supposed to be able to imagine fireworks going off or whatever exactly they're depicting in their story. And the reason I enjoy this performance is because the performers, they obviously were very professional, which is obvious because they do this for a living. But while I was listening, I didn't notice any mistakes. Their precision was spot on. You couldn't tell that they had made a mistake. And with taiko, if they make a mistake, you hear it because it has to be so precise. And so they performed very well, and they were fun and interesting. For example, 2 of the songs that I liked in particular were, one was called the Dragon Song. And the Dragon Song, while part of the group was performing on the drums, there were 4 members who were dancing with these dragon costumes that looked a lot like the dragons, like you would see at a Chinese New Year, that several people are walking around one, except this was done by one person who controlled the entire dragon and the mouth. And the mouth could open and close based on the beats of the music. And it was so entertaining because the dragons themselves, you couldn't see the person controlling them, and it really looked like these dragons were dancing to the music. And it was engaging and amazing to hear. And the other song I enjoyed was the Girls Sleepover, which that one was interesting. You couldn't actually understand what the performers were saying because they're speaking in Japanese, but it's the typical girl sleepover. 2 of the girls might not get along, and they started arguing, and they were using their instruments like to dictate who was speaking and who was arguing with who, and it was so entertaining and funny. And they just went on, they told a scary story, and all of a sudden the girls are jumping at everything and screaming at the monster that came out after them, and it was engaging and fun. And so I really enjoyed that experience. The only thing I didn't like, which is actually more my fault, actually, it was completely my fault, nothing to do with the performers, because I chose seats for this performance that were very close to the stage, and so the volume level, due to the taiko drummers, was very loud, and so it was a bit too much. But that was entirely my doing. And so the second event that I chose was the Japanese Food Sales. And the Japanese Food Sales had several different parts to it. There was obviously the food, and then they had a PowerPoint and a game. And the food was actually the portion that I wasn't too happy with, and mainly it was like my tastes. They gave us all different things, so we could try different pieces. And so we had green tea and yakisoba noodles and miso soup and sushi and rice balls and green iced tea. And I could do the tea fine and the yakisoba noodles and the miso soup and the ice cream fine. They tasted great. They were good dishes. But the rice balls and the sushi, for whatever reason, just really did not agree with me. And it might be how they were made, it might have been the textures they used, but it's not something I could see myself eating in the future. And then after that, they gave us a PowerPoint presentation on a festival. And this festival was called the Hina Matsuri, which is Girls' Day. It takes place on March 3rd. And it's a celebration of like a girl's coming of age. Though there's not a particular age they specify for the girl's coming of age, it's an annual thing done basically to celebrate all girls. And the point of it, you know, they had to have a dolls platform set up, and there can be anywhere from 1 to 7 levels, but always, regardless, at the top level is the Emperor and the Empress, which they're beautifully made dolls, and they add more people if you add more levels. And it kind of reminded me, you know, of the Hispanics quinceañera celebrating the girls coming of age. And so I really liked that I could actually relate it to something. And then after that we had the game. And the game was really fun. I participated in both parts. And the different parts were the contestants and the audience. And there were 5 contestants for each round. And these 5 contestants were given a rice ball. And they all had to eat it. But the twist was, in one of these rice balls was a wasabi filling. And wasabi is a very, very hot spice. And unless you're used to the spice, I mean, you start sweating immediately. It's almost, actually it is worse than jalapenos, in my opinion. And so I did the contestants round, and you know, you're all supposed to eat the rice ball at the same time, and then the audience members are supposed to guess who got the wasabi rice ball. So it's kind of fun because everybody's engaged, and you know, the people who are the contestants are hoping they don't get the wasabi rice ball and trying to fake the audience out. So we had a lot of fun with that, and I really enjoyed it. And then the final portion was the KU Japan Festival. And the only thing I really didn't like was that I didn't have enough time. And it wasn't anything they did, it was just there was so much that they had going on that I couldn't get to everything I wanted to try. And they had 2 different portions. They had performances and shows and PowerPoints, and then they had booths. And the performance they had another taiko group, which they were good, but not as good as Kodo, but I did enjoy them. They had a Yosakoi dance group, and the Yosakoi is a traditional dance that has been modernized. And basically what they do is they take traditional dance moves and they put it to modern upbeat music. So it was very fun and energetic. And then they had a presentation on ramen, which I tried listening to, and ramen is a lot different than what we're used to making pop in the microwave when it comes out. They have all these different flavors and types, and it was just something that was okay, but not as good as some of the other stuff. The other show they had was a cosplay anime show, and it wasn't really about the anime that is a big like cartoon in Japan. It was more about the cosplayers, who are people who enjoy these animes and take hours and hours out of their weeks in order to make costumes that are, you know, individuals they enjoyed from these animes. And these costumes can be very elaborate. There's one guy who made a full set of body armor using rubber from tires and spray painted it the colors, and he had fabric hanging off, and he had a sword, and it's unbelievable the amount of time they put into this. And then the booth section, that was the part I didn't have a ton of time to do. They had a section where you could try on traditional clothes, and unfortunately I didn't have a ton of time, but they had, you know, the shoes and the hanamaka pants and the kimonos for women. And so they had both men and women's clothes, but I didn't get to try anything on. It was just neat to look at. They had a kids games booth, which I did try one of the games. And the point of the game was, you know, to knock all the tower except for the top down without knocking the tower over before you got top of it to the ground. And I didn't pass that game. And then they had a calligraphy booth, and the calligraphy booth was cool. I didn't get to try it, but they taught you, you know, what your name looked like in Japanese calligraphy, and taught you how to write it, and you got to take home a written copy of your name that you made yourself. And then they had an origami booth, which I did get to try. I made an origami swan, and, you know, it came out really well. It was difficult. I really enjoyed it though, but it's not something I could probably recreate without somebody there telling me, here's your next step, here's your next step. But it's really fun. So overall, I really enjoyed this experience. I learned, you know, that yes, the Japanese culture is a lot different from mine. There are things that, you know, I've never would have gotten to experience if I hadn't had this assignment. But there's some things like I could relate to, I could understand, and, you know, I could make a connection between their culture and mine, and so they didn't seem so different. And so what I would recommend to others who might be trying this assignment, or who might just want to get in touch with a different culture, is, you know, instead of reading a book, get involved. Getting involved is great. You have a lot of fun, you learn a lot more, and it's a really, really neat experience. And so I hope you really enjoy this video blog, and that after listening to it, that you might get out and get involved with a culture that is different than your own.